Hey guys, Spirit of the Law here. I plan to do a video for a couple of weeks now looking ahead at all the Age of Empires DLCs lined up for 2025, but the video's taken on a bit of a more somber tone suddenly after some news last week. If you don't follow Age of Empires 3 news, in February last year there was an announcement that Poles and Danes were incoming as new civilizations later in 2024, roughly 2 years after the previous DLC added Italy and Malta. In October last year, though, that timeline was pushed back, citing the number of projects on the go in the franchise and that it would be coming in 2025. A similar thing happened with Age of Mythology's Chinese DLC as well, which has been delayed, and I think all players agree it's better to get a DLC right rather than get it out quickly. Now though, it seems the whole AoE3 DLC has been cancelled, and reading between the lines, it feels like AoE3 players shouldn't expect any more DLCs or even patches for that game going forward. Keeping the servers running and rotating civs in the free-to-play version of the game are the only things that are being explicitly committed to, which essentially puts any future AoE3 new content in the hands of modders. There's no way around it, that's sad news for AoE3 players, and feels like a signal of non-confidence by World's Edge in how that DLC's sales would have performed. I know there's a fun rivalry and needling between the fan bases at times, but AoE2 fans are not at all happy seeing our AoE3 bros losing support and new content. AoE3 is actually my favorite Age of Empires game after AoE2, and in fact I probably wouldn't even have started a YouTube channel in the first place if not for being inspired by an AoE3 YouTuber named Big Thunderman who did fun commentaries back in the day. So any contribution I made to AoE2 is in some ways thanks to AoE3. While it is a smaller scene than AoE2 or AoE4 today, looked at in isolation, it's felt like AoE3 has been trending up in popularity, particularly after it opened up a more limited but free-to-play version. It's obviously disappointing news that DLCs, and maybe even more so patches and bug fixes, are ending, as I get the sense the community still feels the game could benefit from more work on that side of things. All of this is of course tough for AoE3 content creators, and no doubt disappointing for the developers who were working on that game in particular as well. To be at least a little optimistic here, it has to be stated this doesn't mean the game is dead. AoE3 went, I think, 13 years without new content prior to its definitive edition, and was still going strong. I do have to give a bit of credit here as well, that as disappointing as it is, this is objectively better than World's Edge dropping a half-baked DLC to cash in whatever last bit of money they could, and then walk away with the game full of fresh bugs and imbalanced new civs, but having squeezed out a final bit of extra money. Let's be clear, some developers would do that, while World's Edge did not, and I'd be curious to hear from AoE3 fans if they feel like the game is in the best state it's ever been in, or if this was in some way a particularly inopportune time for support to end. It's a reminder this is going to happen at some point for every game, in and outside of our franchise. Chess, for example, stopped getting new DLCs after the 1400s when the devs dropped the En Passant patch and then pieced out, yet that game's still going strong, despite queens obviously being overpowered and white having a higher win rate. The players whom I suspect may be extra nervous at the moment are then Age of Mythology fans, as after a nice debut, their player numbers, at least on Steam, are now lower than AoE3's, which apparently weren't high enough to sustain support for longer than 3 years. There are a couple of reasons though I think Age of Mythology fans can rest easy at the moment, despite also having a DLC delayed last fall. First off, this is a brand new game, and AoE4 also had a sharp drop in player count after release, yet they pressed on and saw a nice bounce back in player numbers after additional content was put out. Second, I think Age of Mythology has a particularly large single-player, campaign-only part of the fanbase, who will show up when new content comes around and drive a lot of sales, but who don't necessarily keep average player numbers up for months at a time in between, which makes the player base look smaller than it is. Remember, sales are what higher-ups care about more than average player count, which is what we can publicly see and a lot of the online discourse focuses on, but doesn't necessarily translate perfectly into how much money the game is generating. The third point though is Age of Mythology has already sold 2 DLCs as part of the premium version some players have already bought, so I'm confident they'll follow through with those, though maybe not quite as confident as I would have been a week ago. It's one thing to pull back a DLC you've teased, and another to cancel 2 of them which people have already paid for, and there's even a trailer that's been put out. They also have other potential ways to try to monetize the game through God packs that haven't even been tested yet, so I don't think they're seriously considering dropping Mythology support anytime soon, and certainly not before seeing the potential sales those things would generate. Speaking of upcoming DLCs though, there's potentially more of those in the pipeline for AoE2. Last year we had 2 single-player focused DLCs, but with a suggestion they aren't done making more regular multiplayer-focused ones yet. Obviously, in lieu of AoE3 news, we should maybe be a little more wary, but tied in with a small bug fix patch a couple of days ago, they hinted things on the 2025 calendar, with surprises we won't need to wait much longer for. After last year, I think it's possible we actually get 2 DLCs this year, both a standard one with new multiplayer civs, as well as the second entry in the new Chronicles spin-off. It's been 15 months since Mountain Royals, and while I think a lot of time was put into Age of Mythology Retold last year by Forgotten Empire Studio, which pushed off the usual sort of AoE2 content understandably, it wouldn't surprise me at all for a usual sort of 2 Civilization DLC later this year to keep the fanbase energized and a bit of reliable revenue coming in. I've given up trying to guess where they're heading next geographically, as last time I guessed Africa, and we got the Caucasus Mountains. They did say a while back they were taking notes on the positive response to the breakup of the Indian civilization into multiple civs, and I know a popular guess online is that the Chinese civ will see a similar expansion at some point. The DLC I'm even more confident is going to come out this year though is the next installment of Chronicles, with the obvious theme being Alexander the Great. Anything else would be an intentional curveball in my view, as it would continue the story they've already started with Sparta and Athens, leading nicely into the Macedonians for the first half of the campaign as Alexander conquers everything from Thrace to modern-day Pakistan, and then possibly cover the subsequent breakup of his empire among his top generals. There's so much popular interest in the topic, particularly because of the movie that came out maybe 10 years ago. Wait, make that 21 years ago. Does anyone else feel kind of old all of a sudden? To me, the race is on to see if the Chronicles Alexander campaign comes out before Part 3 of Hardcore History's ongoing Alexander the Great series. Hopefully they can sync up those releases to land around Alexander's birthday in July, and I'd be a very happy man listening to a fresh new episode while playing that campaign, though the time frame seems a little optimistic for both. Part of why I'm so convinced another Chronicles campaign DLC is coming out this year is the first one seemed to be a huge success. Not only did AoE2 have its highest concurrent player count in years during the week it was released, but that DLC also has more total reviews and a higher percentage of those reviews being positive than Dynasties of India, Dawn of the Dukes, and Lords of the West, though all of those are generally loved by the fanbase. It was an experiment handing it off to Capture Age to make, but it really paid off, and I'm sure the next one is already on the way. Of course, AoE4 is also expecting a DLC this year, probably relatively soon, which was announced last October and slated for some time in 2025, though I don't know any more details than that for when to keep an eye out. After the last DLC, I was personally cheering for an Aztec and Spanish-themed campaign next, which would work as 2 new civs, and wouldn't be surprised by another 4 variant civilizations, as that went over well in the last expansion. Everything though is just speculation on that front for now, and there's tons of different directions they could go instead, with news probably coming soon. That'll do it for this one though, as a little summary of all the things to keep an eye out for. The year isn't starting the way I'm sure everyone was hoping, and all the best to our AoE3 brothers and sisters, but there's lots of year left, and we'll see how things shake out from here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.